The scholar sat down with the prince as he gave him something to eat. The prince seemed to be starving since he ate like a wild animal. He thanked the scholar for saving his life and told him that he didn't just save him, but thousands of other people. The scholar asked him if he had found the solution to the plague after meeting with Li. The prince excitedly told him that he had met with Li and he found him to be a man of great wisdom. He told him what Li said about words, meaning nothing without action. Hearing this, the scholar understood what he was lacking. The prince asked him who he was and promised to help him in the future. The scholar told him that he was Li's apprentice and had a bunch of questions for him, but was worried about being a bother. He told him that he wasn't going to meet with Li since he thought that Li had sent the prince to stop him from coming. He guessed that Li didn't think much of him, and that's why he kept avoiding him. The prince was confused since Li didn't tell him anything like that. The scholar continued by telling him that he had been traveling around the world and spreading wisdom, but he failed to back it up through his actions. He told the prince that Li had sent him to guide him. Surprisingly, the prince believed him and said that he was delighted to become a person who could help others. The prince became super friendly and invited him to the Xia kingdom, suggesting that they join hands and help the people together. At the Lin Yun Immortal Palace, Master Meng Ji was almost out of energy since he kept trying to summon the immortal. The disciples tried to stop him since they were out of pills, but he wasn't going to back down. His face flushed red and he stood up straighter, bowing, spitting out blood, and summoning the immortal. It was pitiful how familiar he was with the steps. After spitting blood, Meng Ji, trembling and exhausted, prayed for the ancestor to appear, asking them why they were not appearing. He started crying and screaming for the immortal to come. However, there was no response. The other disciples saw him this sad, and they couldn't stop their tears. They all started calling for the immortal. Suddenly, the ancestor's stone flashed a milky white light, and a powerful aura filled the area. Master Meng Ji lit up, realizing the immortal was summoned. He stared at the light and yelled in a trembling voice. As the immortal figure started to form, everyone was shocked. They couldn't believe their eyes. It was a woman. She wasn't the most beautiful woman ever, but she had a mature and unique beauty that made her stand out. The male immortals didn't usually care much about their looks, but female immortals did, and she was a perfect example. She looked at Meng Ji and told him that he had heard his voice. All the immortals were speechless, since they weren't expecting a female immortal to appear. Meng Ji quickly replied to her call and told her that it was him who had summoned her. The woman recognized him and asked him if he was about to die, since he looked so pale. Meng Ji told her that he was just out of energy, since he kept trying to summon her. The immortal came closer to Meng Ji and revealed that she couldn't really help him, since she was also weak, and if she transferred her divine chi, she would die. Upon hearing that the immortal was about to die, Meng Ji got emotional. Moreover, it meant that he couldn't ask her for help to become an immortal himself. He clenched his fist and began wondering how it all happened. He had been trying his best to cultivate immortality from a young age, and not only did his cultivation fail, but the immortal was also about to die. Seeing him in this state, the immortal gave him a fruit as a gift. Meng Ji sneakily glanced at the immortal, who seemed to want to try it herself, her pale face slightly flushed. He asked her what it was. Proudly, the immortal told him that it was an extremely valuable fruit and she had managed to obtain it from an ancient relic. She asked him if he knew why the fruit was so valuable. Without waiting for an answer, she told him that it contained Taoist flavor. Meng Ji pretended to be shocked about this revelation. The immortal started flexing even more and told him that she had 2 of these fruits, but she didn't want to eat them. Since she was running out of her life, she had no choice but to consume one of them. Otherwise, she would have given the other fruit to him too. She looked at him and asked if he was scared to hold such a precious fruit in his hands. Meng Ji turned up his acting skills and told her that they were amazing. The immortal ordered him to eat the fruit since he liked it that much. The woman told him that she was curious on how the fruit would affect Hai. He might get an epiphany, if he is lucky. Meng Ji was a bit hesitant, so he told her that he would eat it later, as they had other important matters to deal with right now, like trying to heal her body. The immortal screamed at Meng Ji and told him that it was impossible to cure her. Even the best elixir in the immortal realm couldn't help her. She started tearing up and said that she was merely a woman who was about to die. She wanted to see how much the fruit would help her younger generation. So basically, she was trying to emotionally blackmail him. Meng Ji nodded awkwardly and slowly put the fruit in his mouth. It was sweet and sour, with no seed, and he finished it in 3 bites. Everyone watched him intently, especially the woman, who was eager to see the effects. But nothing happened. The woman frowned and looked at Meng Ji suspiciously. She asked him why there was no change in his body. Han Jue nervously explained that he had been eating fruits containing insects regularly, which is why it was less effective on them now. The woman was shocked and accused him of lying. She couldn't believe such a claim. Han Jue grabbed her arm and mentioned that he might even have something to help the mistress. The woman exploded, accusing him of trying to make her die sooner by pissing her off. She dismissed his words as nonsense and asked him if he was doing it since he was about to die. Master Han Jue held her hands again and screamed that he had something to show her that would put her doubts to rest. He reached into his robe and pulled out a small container. He claimed that it had the honey from the golden flame bees. One of his disciples had received it from an expert. The woman's face froze in surprise, eyes glued to the bottle. She stammered in amazement, recognizing it as honey from golden bees. Her body shook from the extreme shock, and her phantom almost vanished. She knew that what she was seeing was extremely rare, since obtaining the honey of golden flame bees was much harder than getting into heaven. Moreover, the honey had healing properties, which could help her live longer. She calmed down and asked Han Jue how he had obtained such a valuable item. Master Han Jue told her that they had met an expert in the mortal world, and he was the one who gave him the honey. The immortal asked him if he was trying to make her happy, since she was about to die. Han Jue made the most serious face he could and told her that the honey was obvious proof of the expert's existence. However, the woman still didn't believe him. She said that she needed to inspect the honey herself to make sure. Han Jue got a bit hesitant to give her the honey, which made the immortal scream out in anger, since she thought he didn't trust her. She started crying and accused him of having someone else that he cared about more than her. After getting emotionally blackmailed by his ancestor, Han Jue handed over the honey to her. As soon as she got the honey jar, she immediately vanished. Bro got scammed by his own immortal. Han Jue sighed, feeling frustrated that he didn't even get anything for summoning his ancestor, and lost a jar of honey in the process. 5 days passed quickly. After meditating, Master Han Jue regained some energy, although his eyes still had dark circles. He prepared himself again, bowing, spitting blood, lighting incense, and summoning the ancestor. He thought to himself that he would have never contacted the immortal if he knew she would scam him. However, he had to try again. As he cried for his lost honey, he spit some blood and ended up summoning the ancestor again. She appeared out of thin air, just like before, and asked him what he wanted. Han Jue thought to himself how she tried to summon her, and how she had stolen his golden bee, honey, 5 days ago. He was amazed at her acting skills, acting as if nothing had happened. He told her that he thought she was in a bad mood the last time he summoned her, so if he was just worried. The immortal looked at him and told him that she was alright, so he didn't need to worry. This made him mad, and he told her that the mortal world was in a bad situation. The woman looked at him and told him that it was none of her business. She asked him why he cared so much about the mortals and suggested that he keep himself focused on his cultivation. Hearing this, Han Jue got even madder and reminded her about the expert he had mentioned earlier. The woman asked what he meant. So, Han Jue split everything he knew, and with every word, the woman's jaw dropped lower. Finally, she gasped, totally shook. She asked him why he didn't tell her about the expert sooner. Han Jue reminded her of the time she took his honey and ran away. The woman told her to forget the past and move on. She said that the expert in question must be a saint. Han Jue revealed that the Green Cloud Valley had given the expert a fire sparrow as a gift. In the expert's possession, the sparrow laid some eggs, and he gave him one of the eggs. He said that he was expecting her to bring some good gifts for the said expert. Since getting all immortalized, she'd been struggling to rub elbows with the bigwigs and living the hard knock life. Maybe this was her shot at turning the tables and living the high life. She was feeling hopeful about what was coming down the pipeline. The ancestor immediately lit up with excitement and told him that they must establish a good relationship with the expert so that they could keep receiving more opportunities. However, before that, she wanted to take a look at that egg he had. Han Jue's face twitched as he whipped out the egg. She tried to play it cool, but her eyes were wide, and she was practically trembling with excitement as she inspected the egg. Seconds after she got the egg, she vanished into thin air. Han Jue was left feeling empty-handed and peeved, like his ancestor had pulled another fast one on him. The scene changed to a nearby village where people were badly affected by the plague. Disciples from the Lin Immortal Palace and the Lin Gyun Immortal Pavilion were busy helping the people and distributing medicine. Shannon supervising the disciples. She told them to be careful with the people so they don't get hurt. One of the disciples notified her that the palace master had come to visit. She looked back to see Master Han Jue walking towards her. He told her that they should go and ask Li for his suggestions regarding the plague. Qin thought that it wasn't a good idea to bother Li. She asked him if he managed to summon the ancestors. With a disappointed expression, Mengji told her that he had summoned the ancestor, but they couldn't depend on her at all. Qin commented that the Lin Immortal Palace's ancestor was selfish, and Master Mengji agreed. He then revealed that he had planned to give a gift to Master Li. He explained that the boss of the monster had gathered them all in the southern mountain. The boss was a wild boar monster, who wanted to catch the nine-tailed fox, while the Lord Silver Moon was dead. The important thing in all of this was that the boss was a wild boar. Mengji and Qin knew how Li had a thing for wild meat. The boar in question was probably at the fusion stage, so his meat was the tastiest. Mengji told Qin that he could feel a monstrous aura, which meant that there was going to be a fierce battle soon. Qin also got excited upon hearing this and told him that she would do her best to cooperate with him. The two of them teamed up to hunt the wild boar. Inside the boar's cave, he was sound asleep, without any knowledge of what was about to come. Suddenly, a tortoise entered the palace and informed him that the palace master and saintess of the Lin Immortal Palace had visited him. The boar woke up from his sleep, but he was still too confused to realize what was going on. The tortoise screamed at him to run for his life, but the boar wasn't in his senses at the time. He told him that they would turn him into a dish if he didn't run. The boar replied by saying that he wasn't afraid of becoming a dish. As soon as he finished his sentence, a blue flash passed him by a few inches. The pig finally realized he was in trouble, so he started sweating. His flash had injured his tortoise guard. The boar held him in his arms and refused to run. Moments later, Qin and Mengji also entered the palace. They both decided to pack the boar and bring him to Li. However, the boar wasn't going to lie down so easily. He told him that they didn't even know him, yet they chose to kill his brothers. Mengji started telling him all the crimes he committed. He should probably be a lawyer or something. To be honest, he was just taking him because he was tasty. The boar got mad and started his transformation. Mengji looked at him and warned Qin, since the monster was pretty powerful. Before the pig could even come close to Qin, she spit on him, and he turned into a tasty dish. They excitedly picked him up and made their way towards Li's house. The scene changes to the Xia dynasty, where the plague has affected a large number of people. This caused hospitals to flood with people, and the king was unable to find a suitable solution. The people started protecting and gathered outside the palace. One of the guards warned the king that the situation could escalate further if he didn't do something about it. The king was speechless, since he had no idea about how to solve the plague. He started crying and told the guard that it was too cruel to send out soldiers to hold off the people, since it was they who were suffering. The guard told him that they might not be able to help get rid of the plague, but they couldn't just sit around and wait for the people to storm the palace either. They had to perform their duties and protect the palace. Just then, a guard announced that the prince had returned to the palace. Upon hearing of Yunwu's return, the king lit up. One of the guards told the king that the prince had traveled all the way east to ask for help from an expert. He hoped that the prince was back with some good news. The king commanded the guards to let the prince inside. However, the person who walked into the palace didn't look like he could help anyone. The prince was literally walking on 1 HP. He started coughing as usual and announced his return. Upon seeing him in such a frail state, both the king and the guards were shocked. They asked him if he was alright, and the prince told them he was fine. He soon changed his expression and, with a determined face, told them that he had brought back the solution. Hearing this, the king was also relieved. He told his son to hurry up and tell him the solution. The prince started telling him about Li. He revealed that Li had told him the root of the plague, which was actually a virus. In order to get rid of the plague, they simply had to improve their physical condition and leave the rest to the immune system. The king and the guards were understandably confused, since they didn't know what the term virus even meant. The prince suddenly made a serious face and told them that the expert had suggested a 3-step solution to get rid of the plague. Firstly, they needed to separate the people into groups of infected, symptomatic, and healthy people. The people would be housed according to their own group. After that, they needed to change the routes of the infected people and the people showing symptoms of infection. They also needed to discourage gatherings and large crowds, since it could also spread the plague. All of this sounds excessively familiar. Lastly, they need to give the people a prescription. It wasn't enough to heal the victims, but it could slow down the symptoms. The prince explained that the expert also told him that he would visit them when he had the complete solution to curing the plague. The prince laughed and said that he didn't understand how the solution worked, but he was sure that it made sense. He had already notified all the soldiers to carry out all the steps. All they needed to do now was to wait and see the results. One of the guards wondered if a solution was going to work, since it was so unique to all of them. The king told him that his son was king and empathetic, while he was also quite stupid, so he was scared to find out the result of the solution he provided. Before they knew it, a guard rushed into the palace and told them that the plan had failed. The king and the other guards were baffled, since it hadn't even been a few days since they had started implementing the solution. The guard explained that the public was being too much of a hassle and didn't want to isolate themselves. Moreover, they weren't willing to eat the medicine provided by the expert. During this mission, some of the soldiers also got infected. The guards looked at the prince and asked him what they should do next. The prince was out of things to say, so he nervously laughed and acted confused. The outcome of the solution wasn't as he had expected. He told them not to panic and claimed that he had another solution. He announced that they were left with no choice but to go with his other method. Hearing this, the king and the guard got terrified, since there was no saying what the prince was cooking in his mind. Meanwhile, outside Li's house, Qin and Master Meng waited while holding the gift. Qin asked the master if Li would help them. With a serious expression, Meng told her that they were in no ordinary situation. It was a matter of heaven and earth, and they were not even powerful enough to deal with it alone. They needed Li's help no matter what. They had to give it their best and even beg for his help if they wanted to save the world. With a smile, Meng greeted Li and offered him wild boar meat. Li accepted the gift with enthusiasm, commenting on the size of the wild boar. He told them that they were too kind and didn't need to bring him gifts every time they visited him. Qin and Master Meng realized that Li loved their gift, so they prepared to ask him for his help. Before Meng could even finish his sentence, Li asked him if he heard about the recent plague. Li told them that the games were responsible for the plague, since they were the ones carrying the virus. He explained that people got infected, and they were cleaning up the games. He looked at the boar and told them that he didn't want to eat it anymore, since it was the cause of the plague. Qin and Meng got terrified and tried asking him if he was blaming them. However, Li cut them again and told them that they should stop eating games. This made their suspicion clear, and they thought that Li was blaming them for sure. They knew that the plague occurred through the games, and they were the ones who were catching them, so in some way, they thought they were the ones who had caused the plague. Qin started crying as she realized that it was they who had brought the calamity on themselves. They thought that Li was refusing to help them, so they both started sobbing and blaming themselves. Meng thought that Li was angry with them, and that the plague was a sort of punishment for their sins. Li woke them up from their crying session and announced that he could help with the cure. He revealed that he had met a prince a few days ago. The prince looked stupid, but he had a kind heart and wanted to save the people. He asked them if they could take him to Xia Dynasty, where the prince resided. He was too scared to go alone, since he was just immortal and the journey was too long. They both immediately agreed to take him to the prince. After they left, the creatures on Li's lawn began moving again. The boar, who seemed to be cooked, started running around screaming. The boar kept spinning in a circle, screaming that it was too hot. All the other creatures looked at him in shock, since they had never seen a cooked boar running around like that. The boar suddenly saw a fridge in front of him and jumped inside. Bai closed the door to the fridge. They all thought that the boar was just a well-trained food who wanted to store himself for Li. In the Xia dynasty, the guards asked the king about the prince, since they were running out of people. The king ordered the guards to continue looking for the prince as they handed out the medicine. Suddenly, one of the guards rushed in and announced that the palace master, Saintess of Lin Immortal Palace, and a stupid-looking guy were at the gates. He didn't have to roast my boy like that. The other guards wondered what the immortal cultivators were doing in Immortal Palace, since they didn't seem to care about them before. The other guards suggested that they let them in. The three of them walked inside the palace together, and Li was wearing a strange suit. It was actually to protect himself from the spreading plague. The guards got scared upon looking at him and asked him if he was a monster. Qin scolded the guard for disrespecting the expert. Upon hearing his name, the guard lit up and asked if he was the expert of the East. The two guards started touching him and looked at him like some sort of statue. They commented on how he looked a bit different. Qin told them that Li was wearing a suit, so it was not his real face. She claimed that there was a handsome face hiding behind the outfit. The king begged Li to help them cure the plague. As the king got too close, Li pushed him away and told him to maintain a distance. He drew 2 lines with chalk and told the king to continue with his request. The king started crying and told him that his son had carried out the plan exactly as he had stated. Li stopped him again and put a mask on the king, as well as all the guards. He then respectfully told him to continue. He also requested that he not call him a saint, since he was just an ordinary human. The king ignored his request and called him a saint again, explaining how the son followed his plan, but none of it worked. The king explained how the people refused to isolate themselves and didn't want to take the medicine. He complained that the people were quick to trust the demon, but didn't trust a human ruler. In order to regain the trust of the people, the prince was staying with the victims. The prince wanted to know what it felt like for the victims, but that didn't go well either. The prince vanished without any warning. The guards thought about going after him, but then they remembered that he had forbidden them from following him. The guards asked the cultivators if they had any solution to the problem. They all looked at Li and waited for an answer. Li got nervous and asked them if they were talking to the cultivators. The guard lost hope and said that only God could help them now, so they were putting the people's faith in his hands. The most important thing to do for them was to control the spread of the plague. Li finally spoke and told them that the prince had given him a large number of books and notes when he first met him. On his way to the palace, he kept checking on the victims and their symptoms, and he was certain that this was a viral plague. The guards and the king stood there in silence, since they didn't understand him, and Qin and Mengji nodded in agreement. I don't think they understand it either. Li told them that the situation looked serious, but he already had a plan in mind. He took out a small bottle of neuraminidase inhibitor. Don't worry if you don't understand what it means, because I don't know either. However, according to the explanation, it is a drug that can fight viruses. They claim that the victims would be healed after taking the drug. As Li held the bottle in his hands, a guard called out to the servants to bring a victim for the test. They brought the victim and asked Li how they were going to take medicine. Li opened the bottle and started performing an IV infusion on the patient. He was going to use a drip to deliver the medicine directly to the bloodstream. In no time, the patient's appearance completely changed, and he became jacked. The patient told them that he was healthy again. He thanked Li for his help and offered to help them give out the medicine to other people. As the nurses took him away, or he took them away, since he was the one carrying them, the king and others looked at him in silence. Suddenly, they exploded in joy and started praising Li for his amazing job. Li couldn't help but praise himself too, since he had basically performed a miracle. My man was frightened of his own genius. He then thought to himself that the people in that world must have a strong physique, and that's why he was able to cure the man so quickly. Li then whipped out some more suits and told the king to hand them over to the public. He also gave him plenty of medicine to cure everyone. He had also printed out the instructions on how to use the syringe and advised them to contact him if they didn't understand something. The guards and the king were in tears as Li explained everything. They immediately took the manuals and announced that they would begin the mission. Qin and Master Mengji also offered to help the guards. Li thanked them for their hard work and took a sigh of relief. As Li stood in the palace, he heard some footsteps. Someone called to him from the gate. As Li looked up, he noticed that it was a familiar face. It was the scholar from before. After some small talk, Li asked the scholar about his quest for longevity. The scholar explained that he no longer sought longevity, impressing Li with his perspective on life. Li asked him if he had figured it out. The scholar told him that he had been traveling around the world all this time and saw things that he had never seen before. He told him that there was no point in speaking about longevity. The key to understanding the world was to change and adapt. Longevity, on the other hand, was non-changing. A person could live their lives in 1,000 different ways, but there was only one way they could live a long life. The scholar didn't even realize that he was causing Li a headache with all his yapping. He stopped and asked Li if everything was okay. Li told him that it was fine and asked him how much he knew about heaven and earth. The scholar was very confident, so he told Li that he had learned everything. Li thought to himself that the scholar was pretty ignorant and told him to follow him. While they were walking, Li asked him if he could answer some of his questions, since he claimed to have learned everything. The scholar confidently asked Li to question him. Li suddenly stopped and asked him why the leaves started to fall in the autumn. The scholar was left confused on that question. Li continued and asked him why some leaves turned yellow while others were turning green. Before the scholar could even think of anything, Li started bombarding him with even more questions. He asked why the sun rose in the east and set in the west, where the seasons come from, and why the day was longer in the summer and night was longer in the winter. Bro started taking a science quiz. After he finished, Li told him that it was what he called knowledge. He pointed at the cultivators helping the victims by giving them medicine. He told the scholar that it was the knowledge and practice. With knowledge, one could practice and use it. It didn't matter if you were immortal. You could still do stuff that only immortals were known to do. Li slowly glanced back towards the scholar and wondered if he had cooked him too hard. Li patted him on the back and told him that he could share his wisdom with him if he was willing to teach it to others. The scholar lit up and told Li that he understood everything now. He got down on his knees and told him that he was willing to obey all of his orders and turn his wisdom into practice in order to help the people in the Xia dynasty. Li tried explaining to the scholar that he didn't need to help the people here, but he chose to let it go. He ordered the man to bring him a pen and a paper. The scholar immediately rushed to get the items. Li sat him down and told him that he should write all that he spoke. Li shared the entire encyclopedia of medicine with the scholar. The scene changes to a woman with red hair who refuses to let go of her baby. Several doctors tried to take the baby away, but she wasn't ready to leave her son. They told her that she was sick and she needed to get away from the baby, otherwise they could get sick too. The woman told them that there was no one to feed the child if she left them alone. Master Munji put a hand on the woman's shoulder and told her to let him handle the baby. He knew that the people needed Li's help, but he could still help the mother by using a spell. As soon as he used the spell, the women lit up and asked him if he was immortal. Master Munji denied being immortal, and the women questioned him about whether he was the demon god. Despite being close to death himself, Master Munji called the woman auntie and suggested that she look around, since the people who were helping her were all mortals. The woman refused to believe it and pointed at his face, telling him that he looked quite pale, which meant that he didn't have much yang energy in him. She smiled and asked him if they were all the disciples of the demon god. Hearing her say crap about his yang energy made Munji mad. He screamed at her, asking her what she just said. The women called everyone to look at Munji, saying that he was a disciple of the demon god. Munji almost exploded with anger and warned the woman to control her tongue. Suddenly, Munji heard a voice from the crowd, saying that the woman was right. Another voice pointed at the dark circles under his eyes. In no time, the entire crowd started bowing to him and calling him the demon god. Qin arrived at the scene and slowly asked Munji if his real identity was the demon god. Munji looked at her and asked her if she was joking. Suddenly, the crowd started chanting that they would obtain longevity if they believed in the demon god. Munji was still confused about what was happening. Li came running to the scene and asked them about the whole situation. He looked at Munji with a terrified look on his face and asked him if he was the demon god. Munji frantically claimed that he was not the demon god. Now, even I'm convinced he is the demon god. Qin explained that the victims suffered abuse and they didn't have anyone to help them. All they could do was to believe in the Almighty or the devil. They believed in whoever was the strongest. The mortals relied on the Almighty so much that they didn't develop at all. They had no skills and were considered mere ants by most sects. Li wondered why it happened. He said that they might have felt useless since they didn't know how to cultivate. He knew only two people who were born mortals, but didn't give up hope. They were the Prince Yunwu and the scholar. Li told them that the world needed both of them. Suddenly, Qin and Munji heard a voice calling someone mortal and telling them that it was time for a change. Qin immediately called out Li's name. Li asked her what she was saying and explained that he got a bit distracted, so he couldn't hear her voice. Qin and Munji were sweating when they realized that Li had unconsciously awakened some golden energy. Qin thought to herself that she had disturbed his spell casting, and if she hadn't done it, there would have been no telling what could have happened. She started joking around with Li and told him that he got distracted quite easily. As they were talking, they heard people say that the demon god had descended. They saw the red-haired woman standing on a platform with an axe and trying to convince the people to siege the palace. She laughed like a maniac and told the people that only the demon god could rule the land. The people got manipulated by her and agreed to storm the palace. The women even turned to Master Munji and asked him to join them in their raid. Master Munji got furious and decided to teach that woman a lesson. Qin stopped him and told him that the women and the rest of the people were mortals. If he did something to them, Master Li would get angry with them. As they turned around, they saw a huge crowd of people pushing Li into the air. They both got mad upon seeing this and decided to fight the people. Before they could do anything, a mysterious figure called them out from behind and ordered them to stop. It was the prince. He didn't look to be in a good condition. The prince introduced himself and told them that he had planned to spend time with the people to gain their trust and to stop the plague. However, the people didn't trust him, and that's why he looked like that. Qin asked the prince if he was okay. The prince coughed up some blood and told them that he wasn't able to gain the trust of the people, but he managed to get the infection from them. Both Qin and Munji were baffled as they realized how empathetic the prince was. Meng told them that they needed to end the conflict as soon as possible. He took out his celestial heart zither, but before he could play, the prince stopped him once more. He spoke in italics and told the master that he wanted a favor. In the immortal world, the sect master of the celestial aqua sect was using her move called the water pillar. The move created a strong stream of water and washed away sect master Pei and immortal Gu. The woman named Ding was the sect master, and she was trying to fight a golden crow. Using her water pillar, she attacked the bird. The disciples said that if that attack failed to capture the golden crow, they might all die. As the attack hit the crow, it started evaporating. The golden crow's heat caused the water to evaporate. Consequently, immortal Gu and Master Pei were able to escape the water. However, they now had a bigger threat to deal with, the golden crow. As they looked up, the crow was already too close, and it seemed like it was all over. The crow threw one of his flame attacks towards them, and if it landed, could kill both of them. However, something miraculous happened. The attack was stopped before it could even reach the ground. Women with red hair appeared out of nowhere and blocked the attack. Just to be clear, she is not the red-haired woman from before. Master Pei wondered who the woman was. She told them to open their eyes and threw the crow's flames somewhere else. Immortal Gu and Master Pei were impressed with the women. They wondered who she was. The woman flew close to the golden crow and revealed that she was a monster. Her name was Yue Huafeng, and she was actually a phoenix. The two of them saw the woman slowly turn into a magnificent bird. They hadn't seen a phoenix before, so they all were stunned. Sect Master Ding thought to herself that the phoenix was a bird that lived in ancient times. It had the same threat level as a dragon. She couldn't believe that a phoenix could still exist in the mortal world. Meanwhile, immortal Gu knew exactly where the phoenix came from. He had been living in the immortal world for thousands of years, but he had never seen or heard of a phoenix. Li was able to summon a phoenix simply by painting it. Immortal Gu started connecting the dots and realized that the reason Li even painted the phoenix must be because he wanted a mount. The phoenix and the golden crow engaged in a fire battle. However, the victor was already decided. The phoenix easily defeated the golden crow and turned back to her human form. She summoned the painting and asked the cultivators about who owned the painting. Master Pei pointed towards immortal Gu. The women looked at immortal Gu furiously and asked him if he wanted to see the immortal world burn. Immortal Gu started shaking and frantically told her that he didn't want to see the immortal world burn. He revealed that he was given the painting by an expert. The woman looked him in the eyes and told him that his gaze towards her felt weird, almost as if he wanted to make her a mount for someone. She discarded the thought and told him to continue. Immortal Gu told her that he knew an expert in the mortal world through his grandchildren. As Immortal Gu started revealing more details about the expert, the women started getting excited. It almost felt like she was falling in love with the expert, despite never meeting him in person. Sect Master Ding and Master Pei were terrified upon hearing of such an expert's existence. The woman asked him if the expert wanted her as a mount. Immortal Gu explained that at first, he thought that the expert had given him the painting as a gift, but now he believed that it was to summon her and to make her his mount. The woman asked her if the expert drew this painting for her, and if he wanted to ride her. I know it sounds bad, but don't blame me. I'm just the narrator. Immortal Gu agreed with her assessment, which made the women even more happy. She tried to play cool and ask him if the expert really thought he deserved to ride her, simply because he made a painting. Immortal Gu asked her about the qualifications that the expert must have to ride her. She got all shy and asked him where the expert was right now. Master Pei and the sect master tried to eavesdrop on the expert's location, but Immortal Gu simply whispered it into the women's ears. The woman was joyful to hear the location. She grabbed Gu and flew away in an instant. After they left, one of the disciples asked Master Pei if he was going to ask Immortal Gu about the whereabouts of the fire sparrow. The master acted obliviously, but the disciple reminded him that he was talking about the fire sparrow that could turn into a human. He suggested that he could give her to Li. The master made a serious face and told him that he was just taking care of the sparrow for the expert, and he had already sent it as a gift. He suddenly saw his wife getting mad at him. He started laughing nervously and said that the fire sparrow had laid some eggs, so the expert couldn't eat it. Now he was going to send him 3 little chicks. Ding grabbed him by the neck and suggested that they could send him to the expert as food. The scene quickly shifted to the Xia dynasty, where people went about their daily lives. A tour group of the Green Cloud Valley was also visiting the Xia dynasty. Ziyao and Ziyu had managed to sneak into the city. Ziyu asked his sister why they were trying to sneak into the city. Ziyao told him that the Xia dynasty was no ordinary place. The mortal kings were born here, and they had been blessed with the great fortune of the immortal cultivator world. Ziyu asked if by great fortune she meant luck. Ziyu looked back at him with a terrifying expression and told him that luck was a term used to define mortals, but great fortune was used to define a country or even a world. It was a big deal. Ziyu told her that he understood, but he still didn't know why they needed to sneak into the city. Ziyu told him that the Xia dynasty was a hot spot, which made entering the city a bit difficult. They could only see the gate of heaven if they followed a travel route and pretended to be a traveler. Meanwhile, the locals wondered if the two of them felt hot in those mysterious robes. Ziyu asked his sister about travel routes. She explained that the prince had a conspirator with him, who introduced the idea of travel routes to promote foreign tourism. If someone wanted to see the gates of heaven, they needed to pay a lot of money. Basically, all of this was done to improve the economy of the dynasty. Ziyu told her brother that the dynasty might be able to fool mortals, but immortal cultivators like them were able to see through the scam. Moreover, the reason why they put in so much effort was to visit the Heaven Gate. On the other side of the Heaven Gate, Immortal Gu and the Phoenix Girl are talking to each other. She told Immortal Gu that this was the Heaven Gate, and if they wanted to visit the mortal world, they needed to enter the gate. Immortal Gu told her that she was correct. However, the door to the mortal world had been closed off for nearly 10,000 years. It was done to prevent entry into the mortal world. Immortal Gu laughed and told her that each of these seals was so powerful that even a phoenix couldn't destroy them. The woman told him not to worry, since she had something in mind. Immortal Gu asked her what she was planning to do, and the woman revealed her gym physique, telling him that she was going to use her hands. Immortal Gu was left speechless as he realized that the woman was going to use just her strength to break the seal. On the other side of the gate, a few people had gathered to witness the gate of heaven for themselves. Ziyu and Ziyu were also standing in front of the gate. Ziyu asked his sister about the people. She told them that they were the people who wanted to cross the door and enter heaven. She had called them to meet here and cross into heaven together. Ziyu questioned why she chose these people. She told him that the road to immortality had been cut off, and she didn't know what would happen if she forcefully opened the door to heaven. This is why she brought more people with her. Ziyu then asked her why she chose this specific place. His sister told him that the Xia dynasty had the luck of the mortal emperor and was blessed by heaven, so their chances of success were higher. He then asked her why she chose that specific date. Ziyu couldn't endure it anymore and lashed out at him, threatening to unalive him if he asked another question. Suddenly, Ziyu heard a voice calling her from behind. It was Prince Lu. He greeted the two of them and told them that he was hopeful for their mission's success to cross into heaven. He revealed that he had gathered 8 Mahayana stage cultivators for the crossing. They all looked like old men on the brink of death, but they were among the best cultivators in the immortal cultivation world. Ziyu praised the prince and told him that he was smart, though internally, she realized that the cultivators looked like they were on the verge of death. She believed that the cultivators had lived their entire lives in seclusion, and they were waiting to die, since the door to immortality had been closed. This was their last opportunity to enter heaven. Suddenly, the gate to heaven started shaking. Prince Lu screamed that it was their opportunity. He ordered all of them to transfer their energy to the door and break it. They all followed his command and started transferring their energy to the door. Meanwhile, on the other side, the Phoenix woman was single-handedly trying to open the door with just her hands. All the cultivators watched in shock as the door slowly opened. The Phoenix girl exerted all the strength she had. She even had to use the strength of drinking milk to open the door. As the door finally opened, she came face to face with Ziyu and the other cultivators. All of them started celebrating and asked her if she was immortal. The Phoenix girl flew into the air and asked them what they were talking about. As she saw them chanting her praises, she realized that they were the ones who had helped her open the door. She thought to herself that she couldn't open the door by herself. So she called out to all the immortal cultivators and told them that she was going to grant them a wish. The wish was to be immortal. She told them that it was going to be painful and asked if they could endure it. Without waiting for an answer, she stated that she was smacking all the immortal cultivators with her stick. She threw them to the other side of the heaven's gate without any mercy. Ziyu told them that the woman was punishing them. He asked his sister if the old men were going to die, since they were getting beaten by an immortal. Ziyu told him that they were getting punished by the guardian of the gate of heaven for opening the gate forcefully. Prince Lu realized that the woman was going to come for them next, so he decided to put his life on the line and save Ziyu. He told her to run, while he tried his best to stop her. Ziyu started tearing up and asked him if he was really going to sacrifice himself, Before long, the women caught up to him and threw him inside the gate too. She then turned to the Gu's siblings and told them that it was their turn. As she flew towards them, she noticed lightning in the distance. The woman said to herself that she didn't expect her to come this fast, referring to the lightning. It was the celestial lightning in her human form. Celestial lightning glared at the Phoenix woman and asked if she knew what crimes she just committed. The woman tried acting it out and asked her what she did. Her crimes were skipping procedures, opening the heavenly gate without permission, and helping mortals ascend to immortality. The woman replied by saying that making little mistakes added to her charm. She called the celestial lightning lady a wench and argued that the reason she managed to stay alive after all those years was because she was breaking the rules. If she hadn't been doing it, she would have died like the rest of the Fire Phoenix. The celestial lightning told her that there was nothing to be proud of, being imprisoned and then escaping. The Phoenix woman just smirked and told her that she didn't really care. If she was tough enough, she should try and catch her. Annoyed, celestial lightning formed a thunderball and hurled it at the fleeing Phoenix women. The woman was confident in her speed and thought that she could easily dodge the lightning, but the thunderball hit, turning the Phoenix into a skeleton. It had stubbornly kept going until it was hit again. Frustrated, celestial lightning wondered how someone could be so stubborn even after getting hit. The celestial lightning finally prepared her finishing move and smirked, saying that she was done playing games with the Phoenix women. She created a powerful lightning spiral ball and aimed it at the Phoenix woman, who closed her eyes, thinking it was the end. But the lightning bolt missed and struck a lightning rod in the courtyard instead, neutralizing the attack. It was Lee's house, if you couldn't understand by that poster. The yard looked like heaven in the mortal world, since it was so peaceful. The Phoenix woman looked at the rod and wondered if the stick had actually saved her. Suddenly, the lightning woman appeared and asked her what just happened. She couldn't understand how something was able to cancel out her celestial lightning. Seeing her in a frantic state, the Phoenix woman laughed and told her that she was finished. Since she now had that powerful treasure with her, there was nothing the lightning lady could do to hurt her. She then told her that she was the one who was going to turn her into a fish now. The lightning lady got furious and told her that she was the incarnation of heaven, and that there was nothing that could stop her wrath. She flew away and began preparing her biggest attack yet. The Phoenix woman also prepared to attack her with her flames. The two of them finally clash, and the Phoenix woman manages to kill the celestial lady with the help of a metal rod. It diverted the current somewhere else and allowed her to finish the lightning off. The Phoenix woman wondered if it was the expert who had helped her. Exhausted, she fell to the ground with a loud crash. Lee and Da Yi were playing chess at the time. Suddenly, Lee started feeling the presence of monsters around, so he decided to go outside and check, since he wanted to protect Da Yi. He told her that he was going to investigate the noise, and Da Yi insisted on joining him. Outside the gate, they found a man who seemed to be balding and invited him in. Lee and Da Yi were both speechless upon seeing the man. Lee asked him who he was and what he was doing at his house. The man told him that he needed advice on something. Lee grabbed his hands and with a wide smile, told him to eat more black sesame or to drink more milk. The man was confused about what to make of it. Lee soon realized that the man was not asking for advice regarding his hair. Tianyan, a talented immortal cultivator at the Yuanying stage, had spent 400 years obsessed with playing chess and had recently played a chess game, but he was unable to solve it. Seeking advice but too anxious to ask directly, he had been sneaking around the gate. Lei was speechless at the waste of such talent and advised Tianyan not to take chess so seriously. But Tianyan insisted that the path of chess was profound and refused to waste energy on cultivation. Lei was frustrated, feeling Tianyan had mixed up his priorities. However, he wasn't the man to back down so easily. He asked Lei if he was shocked by his determination and thought that he could do it. Lei looked at him with depressed eyes and told him to repeat his initial question. Tianyan asked for advice on overcoming obstacles in chess. When it seemed hopeless, Lei suggested starting over, but Tianyan refused, saying it wasn't possible. Lei told him that if he didn't start over, there was no way to solve the game. Tianyan didn't agree with him, so Lei told him to solve the game slowly. Tianyan told him that it was too hard, and he couldn't do it. My man finally lost his patience and asked the bald guy if he was insane. Annoyed, Lei spat out tomato juice, angry at Tianyan's stubbornness. Lei then asked him if he wanted to play a match with him. Da Yi helped him sit down, worried but impressed by his acting. Just then, King Luo and Shiyu arrived with a pot of wine. They found Lei with Tianyan and asked if they were playing a chess match. Tianyan told them that he came to Lei for advice. They too thought that he wanted advice regarding his hair, so they suggested he drink more milk. The entire sequence played back until both of them realized that Tianyan was insane. Li called Shiyu and invited her to a game of chess. He wanted to show the old man how they played chess, so he could learn something. Li knew that Shiyu was still a rookie, and that she didn't know how to play chess, but that didn't mean she wouldn't have any fun. This reminded Tianyan of the joy of playing chess as a child, and he realized that the process of playing and growing is what makes a chess player stronger. Tianyan couldn't believe what he was witnessing. Dai Yi explained to him that Li was trying to teach him that Shiyu couldn't even compete with him at the start of the rounds, but now she was slowly getting the hang of things. More importantly, both of them were having fun. Dai Yi asked him why he started playing chess in the first place, and what caused him to let go of cultivation. The bald man thought back to his past and saw himself playing chess as he was stuck in a difficult situation. He finally understood what chess was. It helped a person to move forward, while he was only moving backwards. He was so scared of losing that he didn't dare make a move. Tianyan realized that everyone started off as a bad player, and they eventually grew. Li saw him immersed in his own thoughts and invited him to play a game with him. The baldy suddenly grabbed Li's hand in excitement and told him that he had figured it out. Li was confused, but the man explained that if you find yourself in a difficult situation with no hope, all you have to do is to continue moving and never stop. The man got a bit too excited and told him that even if he left everything in the world and kept moving forward, he would become stronger. After all that yapping, the man finally left. Li sighed and felt relieved to finally get rid of this troublesome person. He told Dai Yi that he thought the man was insulting him when he talked about abolishing his cultivation, since he was a guy who couldn't even cultivate. Dai Yi looked at him and told him that playing chess was fun. Li thought to himself how Dai Yi would look if they continued playing chess, and immediately told her that they needed to find another hobby. On his way inside, he accidentally spotted the phoenix woman in the bushes. Li's eyes widened in surprise, thinking the phoenix was just out for a walk. As he got closer, he saw the full picture of the firebird and was amazed by its beauty. The phoenix looked like it was in pain, with blurry flesh and blood on its body. Li planned to help bandage the injured phoenix, but when the phoenix opened its eyes and saw him, it was shocked and asked him what he was trying to do to her in such a state. Li was flustered and didn't know how to explain. At that moment, Dai Yi walked over and asked Li what he was doing with the injured phoenix. Li was even more flustered, trying to explain that he was just trying to help the injured phoenix. Li kept thinking about how beautiful the phoenix looked, and he couldn't wait to ride her. The phoenix lashed out, telling him that she knew all he wanted to do was ride her. Just to be clear, they mean riding her as a mount. Despite the phoenix's resistance, Li held it in his arms. Dai Yi thought he was taking it for dinner and asked if they were going to eat it. Both Li and the phoenix froze and clarified that they were trying to heal its wounds. Li told Dai Yi that it was a rare creature and suggested getting closer to it and cultivating feelings, hoping it might agree to let them ride it. The phoenix woman, hearing this, was speechless and thought to herself that she could hear him say it. Dai Yi asked Li if he really wanted to ride the phoenix. Li told her that she could fly, so it would be fun for them to ride it. Dai Yi got a bit jealous and told him that she could fly, too, since she was the nine-tailed celestial fox. The phoenix women saw this and started acting even more hurt. Li immediately began aiding her wounds. Meanwhile, Dai Yi was burning with anger. Li told her that they were going to treat the phoenix's wounds first. Dai Yi put on a smile and told him that it was all fine. Meanwhile, inside the house, Lackey pointed to some droppings on the ground and told the fire sparrow to clean up. The fire sparrow was exhausted as it cleaned up the mess. She thought to herself how she even got herself in this situation, since she belonged to a celestial species of birds. The fire sparrow then thought to herself that at least Li was a king person, and it might all be a test for her. She needed to do her best as a chicken and slowly make her way up to being his mount. Suddenly, she heard Li call out to Bai, asking him to prepare the operation table. As Li carried the phoenix to the table, the fire sparrow made eye contact with her and realized that it was the phoenix itself. Blackie told her that Li had picked up the phoenix to become her pet, after he was done treating her wounds. Hearing this, the fire sparrow realized that only a phoenix suited Li and prepared to act as a chicken for the rest of her life. This guy even got his mount jealous of him. Meanwhile, Blackie could hear Dai Yi as she fumed with anger, asking how the phoenix dared to think of becoming Li's pet. Blackie tried to calm her down, but it didn't do much. Li suddenly called her out and asked for her help. She quickly changed to her happy expression and went to help him. The phoenix saw Dai Yi approaching it with murderous intent and began screaming. They saw that Li had a knife in his hands and had also placed a bit of seasoning on the side. The phoenix thought for sure that it was getting cooked. The phoenix woman thought that her only way to escape was to transform into a human. As she transformed, Li got a glimpse of her human form, but Da Yi quickly pinned her back to the operating table. She apologized for not holding the bird correctly. Li asked her what the light was just now, and she told him that it was just his imagination. Da Yi told him that the bird must have been feeling pain, since they touched a wound. She showed him a deep wound on the phoenix's body, and told him that the wound looked severe. She told the phoenix that it had some pretty deep wounds. Da Yi got a bit too close and let out an evil smile, saying that it would hurt if she touched the wounds. The phoenix woman realized that Da Yi wanted to kill her for sure. Li told Da Yi that they needed to use anesthesia since the operation would be too painful for her otherwise. The phoenix thought to itself that the most dangerous part of the celestial lightning was the law of destruction, and it would reach her body with just a little touch. She realized that she was about to die and thought of making her final request before her death. She wanted Li to reform the immortal world and revive her bloodline. She knew that if someone was capable of fighting the immortal world, it was Li himself. Before she could say anything, Li gave her the anesthesia shot and she went to sleep. Li asked her what she said, but it was too late. The anesthesia had already kicked in. Da Yi told him that the phoenix had fainted, so that they could peacefully perform the operation on her. Li told her that they should just wait for her to wake up if she had something to say. Moreover, he had a suspicion that the anesthesia might have some side effects, but he thought to himself that it would be too cruel to operate without using the injection. Da Yi laughed as Li cut the phoenix open with his blades. Blackie and the fire sparrow saw all of this and thought it was terrifying. As the operation continued, Da Yi realized that Li was removing the law of destruction from the phoenix's body. He finally finished with the operation and suggested she look after the phoenix as he was going to change his clothes. Da Yi realized that the phoenix had been saved and it would act as another one of Li's pets. She thought to herself that Li must have a reason for taking her as a pet, so she should listen to him. However, she still felt a bit anxious. Da Yi held the phoenix by its neck and told herself that she was just a pet of the master. But for some reason, she felt like killing the phoenix. The phoenix woman woke up to Da Yi's hands on her neck and thought that it was the end for her.